Here's the big question this show answers. How do we leverage technology and human science to positively impact our personal and professional life? The TechHuman Experience has the answer. Here's your host, Inc. 5000 tech founder, neuroscience junkie, and Navy SEAL wannabe, Javier Guerra.
Hello, my fellow tech humans. Today's guest is a cybersecurity veteran with over 25 years of experience, a former Air Force intelligence officer who served during Desert Storm, and a key figure in shaping the cybersecurity landscape. As the CEO of Bytewhisper Security, he's led the charge in defending organizations against some of the most sophisticated cyber threats. He's been at the forefront of discussions on nation-state cybersecurity, election security, and the integration of AI in protecting critical infrastructure. He's a leader and a visionary in the world of cybersecurity. Please welcome John Dickson. Thanks
Howdy,
for joining us today, John.
Javier. Great to be here virtually.
Yes, sir.
Nothing else. So.
Yeah, exactly. Appreciate you carving out the time. It's always great talking with you. Let's start with a little bit of a icebreaker stat to share with the audience. So according to this stat, 65% of developers said they're using artificial intelligence and machine learning in testing efforts, or will be in the next 3 years. What is the upside, and why are they doing it?
It's easy. 60 to 80% bump in code creation. The business case is beyond compelling, and I think almost every organization now that does software development in-house is either using or considering. So those numbers strike me as low at this point. However, the big challenge that we have is many of them are doing it without any type of security or guardrails or safety in mind. Some are. And so here we go again, kind of the internet transition to cloud, now adoption of AI, and the functionality and features and the ability to create them at the speed of light is really compelling and should be considered. Again, however, you have to do so with some kind of active consideration of the security consequences.
Yeah, it's so important. So, security challenges, right? What do you think they really are?
Well, one is that for the most part, software developers are under the gun to create code as quickly as possible. So consideration of anything external to the development of software, anything, it many times is a challenge. There is a learning curve for AI, no doubt, but not so much as far as the use and creation of AI via a prompts. That's pretty straightforward. The probably the biggest learning curve, I think, is the understanding of what particularly generative AI represents to software. The nature of software is very well understood and concrete, a bunch of if statements and logical business logic is defined in software. But suddenly you have this variable, the LLM, the chat GPT, the code copilot, and now the model is broken. So there's two challenges real quickly, and we can go into it. One is obviously hallucinations and creation of things and codes that don't exist because they don't exist in the language model. But probably the bigger one for software is a fancy word called non-determinism, which most people don't understand what it is, but it is a concept where you really don't understand the outputs based on similar inputs. So what I mean is, in the context of AI and large language models, is you use a prompt and you get a certain response back from the chat GPT or whatever copilot or whatever system you're using. You put the same prompt in a second time and get a different response. That is anathema to business logic and business code. And then the other thing I'd throw in is there's I would say, an unnatural trust in the outputs from these language models. And if you're a software developer, you should view the output is great. It's fantastic. It's a great starting point. You don't have to write a line of code from nothing, right? But it's not definitive. It's not a source of truth. It is generated by a language model. It might be correct. Many times it's close. But the verbatim truth that comes out is not the verbatim truth that comes out of language models. So what we tell people at Bytewhisper is that they should view the results as untrusted until validated for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, trust but verify, whatever metaphor you want to steal. No, it's true though. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think they're again, developers are just ecstatic to have something that's pretty close, and let's move on to the next problem. And that's legitimate, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that unfortunately, it just creates security vulnerabilities and other challenges and architecture challenges down the road, and that's the stuff that we deal with as a result.
Yeah, it's moving fast, so fast. So for anybody that doesn't fully understand what a hallucination is, right? When you're talking about large language models, my understanding is that it is that, if you're using GPT, for instance, it could just put something out there and state it as a fact, but it's basically like a delusion. It's wrong. It doesn't really know what it's talking about, but it's speaking as the way it does know.
What it is it doesn't have that particular answer to the question in its language model. It didn't suck it up in the teraflops of info or whatever. So there's some corner case questions and weird questions that you can ask, and if it doesn't come up with something, it will then produce a result that they think is close, and then that's where hallucinations happen. Is where the underlying set of data in the form of the language model simply doesn't have the fact or factoid, and does its best to create something that sounds real, but it's a hallucination. And I regularly use a bunch of tools, and it happens. And the challenge is it does look really, really good too. It looks at like, hey, and the human nature tendency is like, cool, you did it for me, boom, next task. And I don't know if you've used the like AI companions for Zoom or the Copilot for Microsoft for the Teams meetings, but they're pretty slick and they give you a compendium, and they're mostly right and they're very helpful. But once in a while they get it wrong, totally wrong, and it's like, wow, I didn't say that, or that didn't happen, or it steals. So it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important to understand that, right? Because it can get you in a world of trouble, depending on what you're working on, for sure. So
Yeah,
let's
and I think
dive in.
example,
Go ahead.
the
Go ahead.
example I like to use is the Michael Cohen one. He was the Trump's fixer guy that ended up going to prison and got in trouble and all this. But I think in one of his court briefs, he used ChatGPT to create a briefing, and it came up with a court case that didn't exist. So it's cited, and there's a specific example of what you don't want to use is an AI system to create something without verifying it, and it just pulled a court case and made Guerra versus Dixon, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals or something like that. It didn't exist. That's a funny one. Probably not the funniest part of that, but there's more funny ones.
So let's dive into today's topic: securing the future in an evolving cyber landscape. In this episode, we'll explore the current trends and future challenges in cybersecurity. John will share his insights on how organizations can stay ahead of emerging threats, the importance of fostering a strong security culture, and the role of leadership in navigating the complex world of cybersecurity. So let's talk a little bit about AI policy and regulation, John. So, as AI becomes more common in cybersecurity, it's important to establish regulations. I think we can all agree on that. AI is increasingly being integrated into cybersecurity frameworks, but with that, really comes the need for some solid regulation, because it's almost kind of like the Wild West, right? What do you think are some key policy issues that need to be addressed to really use AI both effectively and ethically in cybersecurity?
Well, I would say right now there's a strong division on what to do, and there's three or four challenges. One is you have the interest of the big tech companies who have their own interests because they're competing in an arms race against each other, and that's OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Google, Amazon and others, and they have their own sets of interest, and throw in, a handful of others. They're in an arms race to create artificial general intelligence or awareness. And in so doing, they're spending a lot of money, and with really not a lot of too much thought on the unintended consequence. For example, impact on the grid is a great one. Like, you start doing this in a massive way, you're going to put a strain on a grid, at least in our part of the country, that's already strained from growth and from all kinds of stuff, right? So the second thing is, I think there's a genuine learning curve that policymakers have. I think I just say my 30 years plus of experience dealing with executive teams and boards of directors. Uh, I would just say most of them think that IT in general and security most specifically is a foreign language, and they treat it that way. It's something that somebody else does, a CIO or something. This is even worse. So in the state of Texas, there's at least one state rep that I think knows this stuff pretty well. Guy from up in the Dallas area, Representative Giovanni Caprileone, and one senator, Tan Parker, who knows it pretty well and is able to talk about it conversationally. And then after that, I'm not really sure who knows this stuff. That's one state rep and one state senator. I'm just not aware of anybody else, or maybe others. But so how do you make great policy if the starting point is your elected officials don't know the topic matter at all? So what it is it creates a vacuum, in a vacuum that candidly lobbyists are likely to fill, right, or other influences, because the folks don't know it. And I mean, you and Bethany have been around long enough. You probably know a few state reps or state senators, or know them from the Bexar County delegation. I mean, which one would you turn to for expertise in this topic? I mean, there's just a chasm between what and sort of that's the challenge. I think is like the learning curve is substantial. I think in state government you have a bit, a little bit of a void there too. So in that context, no, right now it's the big tech firms that are driving this. I don't know if you followed it, but there's a California bill called 1047 that was put out there to kind of rein in certain things, and it divided the California tech community almost right down the middle, and it was opposed, and ultimately Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, vetoed it about 2 weeks ago. So there really isn't what I would consider an authoritative source for info right now. There's not. It's so new. It's almost the wild wild west that there's nothing that you can point to as like the guiding star. Like if you're a credit card processor, PCI DSS, boom, in the data security standard. That is the top 10 list, or the operating the regulated industries, banking specifically. They have FFIEC and FDIC and others that promulgate rules that's your North Star. You have to do the best you can, and oh, by the way, this is what you have to adhere to. You don't have a choice. There isn't anything like that right now. The NIST AI risk framework is voluntary. The White House EO on AI is irrelevant to the federal government, and you can view it as a signal, but it's not mandated by anybody. So it is wild wild west out there in general, and specifically as it relates to governance. So stay tuned. And like in that void, you've got open AI going a million miles an hour. So it is quite an interesting field to study. I'll just leave it at that.
It's evolving very quickly. So I think about we've been laggards as the U.S. in the U.S. laggards in implementing a lot of different policies that maybe we wait for Europe to do it first, right, and then we adopt it. Do you think it potentially is going to play out the same way when it comes to AI policy?
I would argue that we don't do it by intention. What Europe's doing, I mean, like some of that, I would like as it relates to European privacy initiatives. I respect what they've done there. They're pretty heavy-handed, but like we don't have them, and it's the opposite side there. That's one that I probably trend towards the way the Europeans are doing it, because I see like an AI, most of the activities happening here. And when I say here, I mean really California and Seattle, and also China. There's maybe one or two good companies that I'm aware of in EU, but for the most part, it is like big tech in general. It's created here and consumed there. So the challenge is going to be like all the monopoly discussions that are happening right now in Europe as it relates to Google and Facebook and some of the others is the Europeans are going to use the power of the market and the power of the purse to get American tech companies to do what they would like to do. Now, what I say is, if you're a Texas-based company, you're Fortune 100, Fortune 500, and you're happy to be in Texas, and it's fairly laissez-faire by design, and for the record, has helped us. I mean, like we have companies moving here because of that, right? They're not moving out of here; they're moving out of California, right? But the downside is they're here and they operate in markets like California, New York, and Europe. So they may be based here and not be subject to certain regulations, but they are most certainly subject to other regulations unless they want to not sell anything into California, New York, or Europe. And that's the real interesting thing is that these Texas-based Fortune 500 companies have no choice but to adhere to this. I mean, like American Airlines is based up in Arlington, right? Southwest is based up there. Exxon, all these other companies that they most certainly do business outside the U.S. They have to adhere to the local stuff. So even if the home base is fairly laissez-faire, the places that they operate are not, for what it's worth.
It's so interesting, and we could talk all day about this stuff, but I'm going to kind of move on to the next question here because we've got a lot to cover. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges of implementing AI in security. AI is really considered transformative for cybersecurity, but its adoption is not, without obstacles, of course. Like, it's been touted as a game changer in cybersecurity, yet implementation is not a cakewalk right now. What are some real world obstacles you think organizations face when adopting AI driven security measures?
I would say let's start with just AI in general. Number one is the starting point. I mean, learning curve issues that I've already mentioned, substantial learning curve issues within the enterprise, both within the IT group and cybersecurity group. Secondly, and probably just as important is, that what's their readiness, what's their starting point of data. Like if they have data all over the place and they don't have like a data approach, the first couple years of AI is just to get enough data in the right format to do anything with it. So their posture, the readiness may not be really high. The other thing is leadership and culture. And that's a big one now where if you have either an IT driven project or a non CEO driven project, you're going to be in at some point it'll catch up with you. You need strong leadership from the absolute top. And then as it relates to security, same problems, learning curve and all that. Uh, I think security teams already have their hands full, or probably in general working at a very high tempo. And so now you have this thing that's out there. And the way that have seen it and see it is everyone's trying to get their arms around it right now and try to figure out where do they manage it, creating things like some kind of risk acceptance process where, oh, you want to bring in a new system that's an ML system or AI or LLM system. How do I even evaluate that from a risk standpoint in a meaningful way and being mindful of where the data resides, what you're doing with the data, the obvious potential biases that happen on the downsides of it. I mean, there's lots of downsides too if you do it poorly. So it's not all upside. So I'd say those handful of things, both for the IT group and then cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, I've been in the industry probably over 20 years now, and I've just seen it evolve so much, and it's extremely relevant to the problems that we're solving, at TechHuman, and it's just crazy to me because it's like there's so many things before this explosion of AI and generative AI and all these new tools that are coming out. there's so many things that are already like lagging behind, and the root of the problems are not getting solved just from the people component and the teams and the organizations and how they, operate. Now you're putting this on top of that, and just
Yeah.
I mean, it's creating so
It's
much more.
mind blowing. It's absolutely
Yeah,
mind
it's
blowing, and
yeah.
I mean, again, I use the word readiness. What's the starting point for the organization? I mean, there were organizations, no doubt, that already had centralized data processes and data labeling and data management, all that, which seems extraordinarily uninteresting and unsexy. That's like hygiene. It's like flossing, or did you brush your teeth all the time? Like, but when you go down the path of AI, like the starting point of data is actually one of the big road stops. If you don't, it's fragmented. You don't have it everywhere. You don't. You may spend the first 15 years trying. Well, you can't put it in a coherent format to understand it. So, like, what is the readiness of your ability to have the data tell you what you've done, what you're doing, how you're doing it in an aggregated way? A lot of companies don't know that still, believe it or not. The e-commerce ones are pretty good at this, knowing where cost of customer acquisition, likelihood of certain think behaviors, user behaviors. They've been monitoring for 15 or 20 years, using not AI but using regular business logic to do that.
So, with all these challenges, what are some ideas that you have that how they can really overcome these challenges and
Mm.
obstacles, kind of move
I mean,
forward?
well, it has to be, I would say, a couple of things right off the bat: CEO level support, executive support, a maybe not a ROI, specific ROI of what it means, but a qualitative ROI that says we want this to make our business more competitive, or we want to have be able to reduce cost structure by 30% the first 4 years, or some reason for doing this. Another area of readiness is really just the team itself. Really hard to hire data scientists and engineers to do this. So the question is, do you have bright, computer scientists and engineers who are fast learners? That's probably your best bet. Is like organizations that have people that were there moving on prem to a cloud and did it gracefully and quickly. Well, that's learning. I mean, I mean, think about it. This is stuff that didn't exist when you got in the career field. I mean, 20 years ago was 2004. There was no cloud to speak of. I mean, the web was out there. I mean, it was pretty. I mean, mobile was starting to come into its own. So, I mean, like two or three of the major facets of computing now, cloud, mobile, and now AI, it didn't exist in a material way 20 years ago. So, like that's astonishing. By the way, I spoke at a conference earlier this year. I was talking about Copilot and Microsoft Copilot, for those that don't know. And I was like, we talk about Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT and Claude and all these Anthropic. We talk about it as if they've been around forever and household names. But here's a quick question: when did Microsoft make commercially available Copilot? What month and year? Just a guess. Have a wild guess.
You talking about like just to the big clients, because I know they
General.
rolled it out
Oh,
first to the
general
big,
availability. GA. What was
like
GA?
general.
General
Uh,
availability.
I think it was this year sometime.
It was February.
Yeah, yeah,
But
beginning of
people,
this
my
year.
point is, people talk about it like
Hmm.
it's O365 or Word or Outlook. Oh yeah, Copilot. But it didn't exist this year. I mean, it did in beta format, but I mean that's breathtaking. I mean, it's like, so. I think I get to speak tomorrow to a group of high school students at Texas State, and that's going to be one heck of a challenge. I'm still working on the thoughts and remarks, but basically, what I'm telling them, the biggest thing you do is just be passionate about what you do and really enjoy the topic, because you have to keep up with it. And if it's considered a chore, you won't do well at it. I mean, part of the reason I think I've done well and people around me have done well is the cliche of being lifelong learners, curious about what we do. You don't have a choice. I mean, like your choice is to like be the last, LAN manager or the last, Outlook on-prem manager, whatever. Yeah, like it's true.
Yeah,
Truth.
no, it is. It's moving fast, and I think
Be
that's
a Novell. You can be a Novell network administrator.
there. You
Like,
go.
so that's
I actually have lifelong learner at like the end of my LinkedIn subject line, right? And I think that's one of the reasons this interested me so much in this space and why I've been diving in, and we've been building tools, and because it's so dynamic, it's moving so fast, and it's so powerful at the same time. It's very interesting stuff. But at the same time, it's both a tool for defense, but it's also a big threat, right? And really, as AI becomes more ingrained in cybersecurity, it's being used by good guys and bad guys. Uh,
well, I mean, I think a lot of people in business think the bad guys are using it quicker, or they're putting it in production more quickly in the form of really, really good ransomware. That it used to be if you were a English as a second language speaker and you're writing a Nigerian uncle or whatever, ransomware or malware email, it sounds really, really good now with ChatGPT. So like there used to be a little bit of a gap. I think the AI and specifically, generative AI is making okay attackers look like really good attackers, and that
yeah,
stinks for us. So.
I've seen more. I've seen a pickup in it. I think just
Hmm.
last week, one of my team members was like, "Hey, heads up, team! Somebody was trying to impersonate me."
Oh, that's impossible.
Yeah, so it's, but
That happened. That's
it's
when you
interesting.
do
Yeah,
well. It's like that happened at Denim Group a bunch of times too. And I got to tell a funny story if we have time. We had one time at the very end of when I was at Coalfire, and Coalfire bought Denim Group, and it was I got a text from the CEO Tom McAndrew, and I didn't have Tom's mobile number, even though we talked all the time. At that particular time, right after, I didn't have his mobile, and he said, "Oh, it's his new mobile number." And so I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" So what did I do as a security person? I didn't like do anything or click on anything. I started asking other people, "Hey, do you have Tom McAndrew's number?" And within like 45 seconds, I had it. But I was texting Sheridan Chambers, my other business partner from Denim Group, who was one of the VPs at Coalfire too. And I was like, "Hey, do you have Tom McAndrew's number?" And he said, "No, that's not it." So I started texting. So I know this guy's a bad guy. I'm texting him, and I'm on this boring sales QBR from Coalfire. They were really, I mean, they were had long meetings and sales meetings, and I'm on this thing. So I'm texting this guy back and forth. I know he's a bad guy, and he finally says, "Okay, can you go to like the store and get a bunch of Amazon gift cards?" Of course, I'm like, "Sure, I'd love to do that. Sure, love to do that, Tom McAndrew." It wasn't Tom, so I go back and forth, and I was like, I'm now at the store, and all they have are Red Lobster gift cards. And this was Sheridan's idea, and I thought it was so funny. And then I texted him and said, "Hey, have you had the biscuits, man? The biscuits are phenomenal. I can get you a bunch of $5 Red Lobster cards." And so that went, and then I finally blocked him. But it was so yeah, the threat's getting better than the Nigerian uncle and the business, but like it was pretty fun. And I give credit to Sheridan for the, and now every time I go to HEB and see those darn biscuits in the baking aisle, I'm like, man, that was a funny joke. And I'm sure some guy like in Belarus or Russia was like, what? Red Lobster biscuits?
yeah.
Like what? Like what?
Google is your friend. You probably
Yeah,
had to look it
Google.
up.
There you go. So you got to have fun in the business. So
So yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about future advancements in AI for cybersecurity. Where do you really see the most significant advancements coming in the space?
ask me that tomorrow. I asked me the day after. I mean, I would. The truth is, I think the models get better and better and better, so the hallucinations become less pronounced. The obvious errors. I mean, it's anybody's guess where general intelligence (AGI) hits the awareness. There are people that are way smarter than me that have strong opinions about that, but I would just say it's going so crazy fast, and I like like IT and cybersecurity were going fast. This is even going faster to the point where it's like I could probably spend 3 or 4 hours a day just keeping up on what Sam Altman is doing to Elon Musk and who has the fastest, GPU driven, whatever. It's just like the current affairs is crazy. I would say this. I think the promise is I would love to see the code generation come in with more security consideration and more guardrails, because again, the business case for generation is quite compelling, but right now it's not. So more of the built-in guardrails, the obvious protections that right now are either forced or after the fact. I would say, in general, I'm a big positive person on AI. I'm not dystopian, uh, so I use it for a lot of different things. It's pretty cool. And I'll give you like a really mundane one. It's the mundane and repetitive that is probably the area that's going to have the most immediate effect, making people like you and I highly effective, more effective. So one thing you have to do when you go and present at conferences all the time is to put your PowerPoint in their format. So they send you this template and you get it and you're like, oh, great. I got to and it is not a particularly straightforward process. It breaks whatever graphics you have, and what formatting, whatever I did at Denim Group was we had a marketing person. I was like, hey, here you go, do this. And if I didn't appreciate what that person did at Denim Group, I certainly appreciate it now because I've done it a couple of times and it's highly manual and you're like, great, like it breaks everything. So what I did as an example of one, I was at a HughesecCon, which is a really great Houston-based security conference last month, and they had a template. I put it up in, I think, in SharePoint or in Teams, and I put the template, and I said, "Hey, take this presentation and put it in this template," and it got real close. And there's a couple things that fell out that were kind of goofy. There's other things I didn't like, but like between that and then just the general brainstorming function of PowerPoint, man, that was, instead of 3 or 4 hours of tedious whatever. The other one I like a lot is the Zoom AI companion, which does the compendium of the calls. I've been using that really since February or earlier or whenever it came out. And what I've come to learn is, as a note taking function for memory and for like really refreshing what you talked about, it's phenomenal. As a way between you and I, it's pretty good because there'll be some things we both recognize that we didn't say that get in there. But as a matter of record, like as a court hearing, verbatim transcript, terrible. So it is, what I use it for is, if you and I were to have a call and we go over through a bunch of stuff, it has next steps and it's pretty darn good. I'll use it before our next call to go back and refresh my memory. So as a memory jogger, it's phenomenal. And sure enough, there's always one or two things like, oh, I totally told Javier I was going to do this. I totally told him, and I didn't do it. So I got to go do that. So I usually, like 2 days before I have a call, I'll go find those notes from before and always pick up one or two things I forgot to do. So that's pretty slick. But those are just like really low level. As far as creating images of Javier as a unicorn riding something like those are okay. Those are card tricks and kind of cute, deep fakes and all that. That's but like helping you and I do what we do better. There's a lot of cool stuff coming and out there. I mean, I've been using Grammarly for a very long time. That's machine learning behind the scenes. It's just become something that we do, and it's going to be less pronounced. It'll just be something that's behind the scenes. Well, which is like automation in general. I mean, like you do voice to text, right? You do translation. All that has components of this to it that we just do. I do it all the time. So
there's so much out there. What areas should organizations really be focusing on right now to stay ahead of the
I would say
emerging
broadly,
threats? More so
yeah.
than emerging
Well,
threats.
let's talk just again general AI and then kind of
Mhm.
cybersecurity version. One is, I mean, almost everybody has some kind pilot program or Copilot, using Copilot or some other technology. The challenge, by the way, with Copilot, it's not free. So I think it's $30 per head per month. So you're paying for it, right? Because you got to pay Microsoft to pay for their $1 billion investment in OpenAI. So that's how they're doing it. But I think everybody has a pilot program at this point. Really, the question is: are these organizations able to find the best use cases to solve? And again, anything's repetitive, mundane, um, yeah, straightforward. Those are obvious use case studies. And there's an old one from MD Anderson that Harvard Business Study did a few years back that I still love. And again, if it's a few years back, it's really machine learning, not generative AI. But basically, I think MD Anderson took a big pot of money to really solve, quote unquote, solve cancer or parts of cancer, the diagnosis of cancer, and I don't think they made a lot of progress on that. But what they did spend time and they did make progress on the mundane issue of patient scheduling. And this is a particularly sensitive topic because my mother-in-law had breast cancer, passed away from breast cancer about 8 years ago. And when she went to MD Anderson, it was like a triathlon, right? Going from point A to point B, and all the meetings and appointments and like testing and all that. So what MD Anderson did use machine learning to do was to synchronize and harmonize patient care around the patient, so that there, doctors, facilities, machines, medicine, like so that the choreography was better to make it less of disruptive to patients. I love that area and idea. I think for other organizations, it's similar problems. The one that I've heard, my sister is a chemical engineer, so she designs and helps build, amongst many things, uh, refineries, and she been introduced me to something called a laydown yard. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But what it is when they build something, this is, if there's any engineers that listen to this, they're gonna laugh because it's obvious. But like, to people that don't build things in the physical world, they don't know what this is. But like, you have a laydown yard that's this ginormous field, probably of aggregate, that you've laid down all the components, pipes and stuff that you're going to build, right? And the mechanics and the logistics of that is extraordinarily difficult. And there's a lot of waste and inefficiencies built in that. And that was one of the use cases that she passed on for their industry that's going to solve the choreography of getting the right sets. Because sure enough, if you have the wrong type of pipe or fit, or I don't know, wrong type of hardware, like that stops the construction in certain ways. So so kind of cool stuff. Like, so I think it's the chemical engineers and the hospital administrators and the utility managers and their ability to identify the most straightforward use cases. That's where I think the biggest challenge is. Same thing in the security world. Security world is a little different. It's how do you number one, how do you ask questions of your vendors to better understand what they're doing? Because I think on the what we're seeing specifically in security, cybersecurity, is that a lot of the ML and AIs come in to these organizations via their vendors and their vendors' capabilities. So, like, how do you understand, implement, and ask questions around that? You may not have your own data scientists, you may not do your own initiative to solve an internal problem, but you're certainly going to buy capabilities that are in your monitoring equipment or your monitoring platform, right? And how, when they make claims to say like, oh, ours is 40% better, our program is 40% better, or our platform's 50% more efficient. How what kind of questions do you ask to validate that? Like, that's been an area for a very long time. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point because it's moving so fast. Everybody is trying to stay on par with it, and
yeah,
there's a lot of marketing going on out there.
is
Of
it-
course, it's an important component. You've got to communicate how you're good and how you're different in order to be able to help people. But um, how do you kind of test and validate those claims with
Mhm.
it being so new and evolving so quickly?
And the
Uh,
learning curve again,
yeah,
back to
yeah,
my experience is many organizations don't even know the right questions to ask. So,
hmm yeah.
so
It's
yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
craziness. So good time to talk about really, you know, basically certifications. Right? In the field of cybersecurity, there's often a debate between the value of practical experience versus certifications. What advice would you give to maybe some newcomers that want to get into the field about how to build a solid foundation in cybersecurity?
Oh, know how to program or know operating systems, know, OS level, be a network administrator. I think the best folks that I know really like were Windows administrators at some point, or AD, and they knew the network really, really well. They knew, or they wrote code and they knew it really, really well. And because the certs are really just a validation or like a cherry on top. It's like, I know all this stuff, and by the way, I have a cert. It's kind of cool. Those, it's a signal to the world that I care about this and validated. But what it's not good at, I'm not these, degree factories or the certification factories. Be a cybersecurity person and 9 months or 6 months. I am deeply skeptical of those places because there's just too much to learn. And the example that I like to throw out was, I mean, this is like 25 years ago. I was working with a couple guys on a firewall. We were playing with a firewall, and a firewall blocks in stuff coming into your organization, but also blocks stuff going out. People forget that. And so we saw uh, network protocols. I think it was NetBIOS and NetBUI at the time, port 135 through 139, TCP port 135 through 139, somewhere in there. Look, making these calls out from the network to the world, and I had never seen that, and I was like, wow, why is this coming from the inside trying to get to the outside world? And the guy that was training me said that's the other reason you have firewalls, is to keep all these packets inside your network. And those protocols are such to let the whole world know that they're here. They're like beacons, right? But that's not what you want if you're running a private network. I had never seen that, and I would never see it if I hadn't had the practical experience, the hands-on experience. So, I think as quickly as people can get hands-on experience with operating systems or program, code in Python, they go from talking about this stuff conceptually to like hands-on. And again, certs I think are a nice cherry on top, but they're just exceptionally difficult to. I've seen people that that look great on paper, and I ask them one question and they can't answer it. And I ask, the question is, explain DNS, explain domain name service, and where some of the potential weaknesses are for security. If you can't, if you just say, well, DNS is the system that translates IP addresses to domains. Yeah, okay, we got that part. But how does it replicate? How does it talk? And then what are if you don't mention DNS poisoning, you probably don't understand it. But that's a good like marker question for somebody that's a quote unquote technical security person. If you don't know it, cool, but
Yeah, no, I mean the real world experience is so valuable. I think in my mind, the certification can kind of help accelerate or give a framework around kind of that real world learning, maybe. But I don't know. I mean, do you think newcomers into the space, do you think they should go out and start with the certification and go
no,
get a
I
real
would say
real
get a
world
really
job?
good job, get a job, go work at a SOC, go
Okay.
where, I mean, in San Antonio, I think CrowdStrike has a SOC, or
Hmm.
SOC type. A bunch of folks do. Air Force does.
Hmm.
I mean, like working hands on is, there's no substitute for it. I don't know
Yeah.
how to say that any more diplomatically. Um,
Because and it depends on the organization, right? If they're going to put more weight on that cert, if you have it to get that job or not, basically. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, like again, I think that people are scrutinizing those certs more, and they're kind of like, okay, good, you have them, That's great. It's a value add. Don't discount that. But like as the first and last starting point for career development, I remain skeptical.
Yeah, yeah. So, what kinds of jobs do you see really disappearing, right? Because of the AI and the transformation it's causing.
Uh, Again, back to the mundane and repeatable. If you're doing things that are repeatable and mundane, those are the most likely. But I do believe that we're creating new jobs that didn't exist before. So there's that, and we just don't know what they are. We don't know. So it's easy to be dystopian and say it's going to get rid of entire sets of jobs, but automation more broadly is doing that. I mean, like if you went to HEB 10 years ago, there wasn't an automatic check line. Depending on which HEB you go to, there's 10 or 15 now, right? Well, those are 10 or 15 checker jobs that no longer exist. Now, are they doing other things within HEB? Probably, maybe. But what it doesn't account for are things like cybersecurity in general. Like this industry didn't exist 25 years ago at all, and it's massive now. Like the whole industry didn't exist. I mean, I did my CISSP in 1998. Uh, do the math on that. That was 26 years ago. My number is 4649. I think the numbers are now like in the half a millions. Uh, but my point is that it's like there's a lot that's happened since then. So sorry, I
Yeah,
just
moving
yeah,
target for sure.
yeah, moving target.
Yeah. So, I know it's not foolproof, but any just from your opinion, let's talk about your opinion.
Mhm.
If people are looking to really future proof their careers in cybersecurity, really what skills or areas of expertise do you believe they should really see as most valuable in an
I think
AI driven
security,
environment?
security is one of them. I mean, just understanding broad applicability of AI and concepts right now. You don't have to be a data scientist, don't have to be a mathematician or coder, but you have to understand broadly where the use cases are and how it fits in. Or that's one thing. But the other thing is become an AI powered whatever it is you do. Like if you're a governance person, that you know all these things I just talked about, and you're by far the most effective, most efficient one. I mean, I think you do a lot of this stuff inherently, right, on your end because you're a sole proprietor basically. And uh, but I mean, like if you're a person at USAA or HEB in San Antonio and you're mid-level manager, um, yeah, man, you're going to stand out if you don't have this stuff in 5 years. I mean, like think about this as a you remember PMP and project managers? If you have generic vanilla skills, man, I think you've got to know more than to have because a lot of those tasks are going to be automated if they're not already automated. Having the I think one area that's not going away, but like man, it's a lot lighter is the compliance and security governance side of the house. A lot of the people that have been laid off in the last 3 years are probably the lighter side of cybersecurity. I fear, and so become more technical, learn AI, constantly hone your skills. I think, as I mentioned, I'm talking to a bunch of high school kids tomorrow up at Texas State, and that's what I'm going to pass on. Is like if you start to feel comfortable and you think you can learn and adapt by osmosis in your job, that ain't the case. 40 hours a week. I mean, you have to have a disciplined reading program, and you have to read about this outside of the context of 40 hours a week, or else you'll just be left behind. So the people that have been successful, the people that just picked up, I mean, like I didn't go to AI school. I didn't go to cyber. I'm a political science major, and I'm almost everything I learned on the you know, on the fly. And people would argue, but I could never be. I'm not a coder. I've never been a coder. I'm not the most technical person in the room, but I'm probably the most technical business person in the room, and I know where the opportunities exist. And and I did all that by not, I it's just by osmosis. I hate to say. And when I was in the Air Force, I learned because we got deployed a couple times without system administrators, so we were forced almost at gunpoint to learn Unix. And in retrospect, that was like one of the biggest blessings I've ever had. Is that to be
Yeah,
quite candid.
what I see is being very very important. A few different things, but I'll quote Ray Dalio first. So I think 6 years ago I read his book called Principles, and in that book he says that he believes that the most important language of the future is understanding how to communicate with computers.
Hmm.
And we're living that right now, like that. We're seeing that with prompt engineering and all this
It's
stuff.
prompts. It's prompt.
Yeah,
It's less about coding. It's more prompts. I
yeah,
would agree with
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's understanding, and then to even taking that a layer deeper is understanding how they operate, right, or just understanding how they're making decisions. But I see as you know the advancement of this technology is extremely powerful. But even if you just talk about basic automation, humans are inherently not perfect, and now we're taking technologies to automate the potentially the imperfections, right, or what we don't know, what we don't know, or what we're missing. And so I believe that in the future is understanding that business, having that business acumen, understanding really how to communicate with computers, understanding how they think and operate in a sense, right, at a certain depth, not super deep, and understanding human behavior and mashing those together to move into the future is going to be extremely powerful and extremely make people extremely um, sought after, so to speak, right? If you can understand those things, I believe that it's going to be, it's going to make some people very competitively sought after, so to speak.
Well, I mean, and that's back to the question about what career fields are going away. We really don't know yet, but there will be ones that go away. But we do know that there will be ones that replace it, and then also they will be areas where you know people like you and I become even wildly more effective. I mean, again, there was a time not that long ago where people didn't have phones, didn't have emails. I mean, I remember in my career uh, where we would go places and we didn't have it. I mean, I look back like, how do we even do that? How do we? How and I mean, going to Europe. I'm in the early '90s in the Air Force. I got sent over there for like 8 weeks one time, and I was like, how did I like call back on a landline? And I think I did, but I don't remember how I did that. But I mean, I'm so used to having a mobile phone now that roams in Europe that I'd never thought of that. So it's kind of
So, I'm asking another question. We talked a little bit before, when we talked before we recorded this, but I think I mentioned that there was some stat about that, that basically said something to the effect of 80% plus of cybersecurity issues come from people. What is your opinion on, kind of, being able to solve and protect against problems using technology, but also kind of the importance of the people component and in that mix?
well. I'll tell you the attacker version of that, which is if you can't get in technically, you can always go after the person, like via phishing or some manipulation or social engineering. Uh, I think wow. I mean, the people that are in these roles now are so wildly more smart on what they do exponentially. I mean, we are just talking about this yesterday in California with a client about how a few years back it was like, oh, just patch the system, and that was the cybersecurity was a patching discussion or an access management discussion. Like, make sure you have stronger passwords. I mean, it seems quaint in many ways. So, like, now you have to understand all this and have one eye on the future to understand and interpret future problems. Including now, you've got nation state threat actors that are, potentially trying to ruin your day. It's not, the war games character, the hacktivist or the teenage script kiddie anymore. It's like the People's Liberation Army. Um, and so the threat has gotten much more complex. The field of play has gotten more complex and is fastly changing. So it's just a lot. I mean, like, I don't. And so the other thing is you have to specialize. You can't be good at everything. You have to have a broad knowledge. And in my case, it's application security and AI. But like, I don't. There's areas like threat intelligence and network defense stuff that I like I have to defer to others at this point. I know a lot about a lot, and but I don't know everything, because so that's the other thing, is just know you may not know everything about everything, but at this point who to call to get help. Like, hey, you got this type of project. Who do you know that does this, that kind of thing, or
Yeah,
this
I was just
that?
I was just envisioning, I forgot what book it was, but maybe Think and Grow Rich, and they talk about Henry Ford. Very little education, but he had like this desk with buttons of all the experts. He could just push a button, the expert would come to his desk and talk to him and give him the answers that he needed. And I thought about that earlier when you're talking about like senators and officials that, they don't really understand this stuff. But I think it's extremely important for those leaders, and almost should be required for our leaders, to have people that they have like their board of advisors, right? That are not
Yeah,
lobbyists and they don't have ulterior motives
they
on
have
feeding
staff.
them info.
They have legislative directors and staffs and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But those two are in our space are fairly non-technical. Remember, like if you're a state rep, you probably have a small office of a handful of people, less than five, and you have to be expert on everything. There's gonna be oil and gas legislation that comes in, everything under the sun that comes in. I'm just saying, like, of all the areas of expertise, this is not one of them. So it's like it's just not. It's one that I mean, most of the population doesn't understand IT stuff, right? And which is okay. I mean, they understand how it works. You don't. I mean, you and I don't understand everything about how electricity works, but we know how to plug in to use it. I mean, so there's that too. Cloud computing, the metaphor. You don't have to understand all of it, but you just it's simplified for users. So
Yeah, it's like emptying the ocean with a teaspoon, I call it. And the ocean is getting deeper. All the rivers are flowing into it. Um, so, John, we're kind of coming up on time here. Let me ask you a couple more questions before we close things out. In your opinion, what technology does the world need that doesn't exist yet?
wow, that's so broad. I know you even gave me a heads up on that, but it's so mind blowing. I would say the biggest thing right now is uh, responsible and safeguards around AI development, because it's so that's a broad answer to a broad set of technologies. But I think more understanding about the guardrails and how those are implemented as new capabilities come out. Because I mean, I've heard the dystopian numbers that was it 10% of AI data scientists think that AI could cause an extinction event. It's
Mm,
like 10%. Wow.
nice.
So
It's
I
comforting.
think I mean the Skynet would be aware. I mean that's
Yeah, yeah.
uh, but knowing what I know about the elected officials and the policymakers, knowing what I know about the ambitions of those 7 or 8 companies that are going a million miles an hour, that's probably my biggest thing. Is like I hope that there is more effort to more meaningful effort to keep the safety and security components of AI up with the development of AI itself.
Yeah, and it makes me think about, you mentioned Skynet. I think it was back in 2017 when I really started taking blockchain technology and machine learning and automation and robotics, AI, all this stuff a lot more seriously. Um, I was like, I mean, it really is Skynet. You've got Starlink that's out there, right? And then you've got the, automated backbone databases of the blockchain that all the AI and robotics can make automated decisions bouncing off of that, and Starlink, Skynet, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And you mentioned earlier about 20 years ago we didn't have this and that. Like, if I'm mind boggled by like, what is it going to be like in 20 more years? The average person out there that is not ingrained in this stuff like you and I is going to be completely blindsided. Um, it's so mind boggling to think about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, I would just say one of the outcomes I could have done after Denim Group was to really retire and play golf and do whatever. And I think this was interesting enough to not do that because The way I tell people is AI could probably go either way, and maybe guys like me don't have the luxury to tap out at this point, you know. So that's that sounds kind of narcissistic, but it's mostly true. So
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to understand how it's all working, right? Both to do good and to protect yourself from Skynet. So,
exactly,
these
exactly.
go watch the Terminator movies, and you
I,
know,
I you know I just wrote that down. Like I haven't in a while. Now that I have kids, I
yeah,
think it's yeah, maybe that's a good Halloween costume too. Just come as Skynet, you
yeah,
know. So,
yeah. My son was he was majoring at A&M for marine biology, and he recently shifted this year, and he said, I'm going to do AI machine learning at UT Austin. So,
mm,
yeah, I'm excited
nice,
about that.
very cool.
Yeah. So, you recently launched a new company, Bytewhisper Security. I know you're really focusing on AI and cybersecurity, but can you really help us understand more specifically, like what types of problems you're solving?
It's really around helping clients that build applications with AI and consume applications or AI in those in their applications that they deploy. As I mentioned, there's a huge learning gap, learning curve in the enterprise. I have a business partner and CTO fellow founder up in Denver in the form of a guy named Kyle Hankins, who's an AppSec application security rock star, ex Denim Group leader, ex Coalfire leader, and he has along the way picked up and learned LLMs pretty well. So that's what we're trying to solve is this area, and in so doing, we're also helping around governance and other areas for the adoption, the safe adoption deployment of AI to help organizations compete better. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, so interesting. I'll have to bounce off this kind of curriculum off you that I told you about the ex CEO um, got me, but because I'm focused on I'm doing it with my son, right? Is learning AI, machine learning, data science, but the security component is so fascinating to me and how it applies to that. I see it very much in like the needs of just human nature, right? I'm a huge nerd when it comes to neuroscience, human behavior, all that stuff. And I always think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that safety and security is number one. It's the foundation. And it's very fascinating. So definitely want to talk some more with you when you have time. Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and close things out, John. Again, thank you very much for your time, and I'll make sure and circle back around with you,
My
listeners.
pleasure. Tell your
Yeah,
better half, Bethany. I said hello.
yeah, will do.
And I still don't. Did you have a kid when you were like 11? So you have a
Yeah,
college
no, I
kid?
have a 20-year-old. He's 20. Yeah, I have a 20-year-old and a
What?
3-year-old. She just turned
Wow.
3. Yeah. So
I did not know that. I learned
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
No,
I was not
pleasure.
12. I was not 12, but
But you look like you're super young. I
thank
have
you.
a 11-year-old and a 16-year-old. I got married at 40, so I
Nice,
did the opposite. So I got a
nice.
little guy. So and that's part of this is to make a world where he does well
Yep.
in the future. So
Yeah, definitely a huge motivator for me as well. And I think it's been so important as parents to guide our kids. And I'm one of the crazy ones too that I think I can make a change, right? And to kind of help. So that's what I do. And I chose TechHuman as the first vehicle to do that through. But there's more coming for sure. I'm definitely a lifelong learner and a lifelong doer. So
yeah,
I
you too, man.
like
Tambien, tambien.
yeah,
Appreciate
yeah, yeah. Well, thanks again, John.
it.
Listeners, be sure to check out his work and follow John on social media. Website links and social handles will be in the show description. Finally, just one last thing, John, in relation to our conversation today, what's one piece of actionable advice that you'd like the audience to walk away with?
Be able to understand and describe AI and machine learning and LLMs. Just be able to talk about it conversationally. And there's a ton of stuff on YouTube. There's a ton of stuff out there. Just at a high level, be able to talk about that and understand it. If you do that, then that's the starting point.
Yeah, and you can literally just take what he said right there and stick it into GPT, and it will teach you about it. It's easy.
There's a bunch of stuff on online that's quite good now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, John. Listeners, don't forget to help your fellow tech humans. Share this podcast and follow me on LinkedIn at Javier Guerra 360. See you next time on the
appreciate
TechHuman
it,
Experience.
Javier.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.
The TechHuman Experience